Good morning. I'm Margie Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth, and we're here with a webinar for you today. I hope everyone had a nice weekend, and today's a little on the dreary side, but we are definitely going to be livening things up because we have Jeff Perrotti here with many of his friends. So this is going to be a very, very wonderful webinar. Just so you know, we are recording it at Jeff's urging. So just so you know that we are recording. And just a little bit about Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth. We're a small nonprofit organization. Our mission is prevention and intervention in matters of health and safety for youth. And we've been pretty much throughout the school closure coming on at 10 o'clock every day with a webinar. We'll be doing that all this week. We will not be broadcasting anything next week because some schools are on vacation, others aren't, and we're going to be on vacation. So anyway, I just want to let you know that for accountability purposes, we have to give a code. It's a 6-digit code. Jeff will be giving it 1 digit at a time throughout the presentation. If anyone has any trouble following the code, you miss a digit, whatever, please don't use the chat feature. To talk about this, simply email me, Margie, at mpyinc.org. margie@mpyinc.org. And the chat feature will be running. I think we have found it to be a very useful way for us to communicate with each other and also with the presenter. So it's my pleasure now to present Jeff Perrotti, who is going to be talking about resiliency with LGBTQ students. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Margie.
You're welcome, Jeffrey.
Am I on here? Good. Thank you. Thanks so much, Margie, to you and to all your wonderful staff, to Beth and Lauren and Melina and all the help in making this happen. We're just very grateful that you've provided this opportunity to bring people together. And it's so wonderful to see so many familiar people on the registration list. And we often talk about that our work is all about connecting and empowering people. So at this time, providing this opportunity for us, I really appreciate it, Margie. And a very happy birthday to you, Margie. Today's Margie's birthday. So we have that to celebrate as well.
Thank you very much, Jeff. As I was saying, you know, what more can you ask for a birthday? We have a pandemic and now we're going to have a storm. So I don't know what the universe is telling me, but here we are. So thank you for your birthday wishes.
Thanks. So we have, I have quite a group here. Landon and I are actually going to be facilitating this together. And then we'll be bringing on a panel of guests. There's Landon. So one bit of advice somebody gave me once was when somebody asks you to do something challenging, say yes and bring people along. And so that's what I did today. And Landon and I have been working together since Landon was in high school. And Landon is, many of you know him because he's been doing this work for several years now. And when President Obama issued his guidance on gender identity, they asked for a student and a family from Massachusetts to interview, and they interviewed Landon, and Rolling Stone magazine picked up the interview that was released with the guidance, and they did a story on Landon and his family. Excuse me. And they labeled Landon President Obama's poster boy for transgender student rights. So Landon's made a difference not only in his school and in Massachusetts, but far and wide, far beyond our state. So I'm really grateful that you're here. Good morning, Landon.
Morning, Jeff.
Nice, good. So, as Margie said, I'm Jeff Perrotti, and as most of you know, I'm with the Safe Schools program for LGBTQ students, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning students. When I was growing up many decades ago, queer was a derogatory term, and now it's been, for several years now, reclaimed as a term of empowerment and a very positive term to mean not heterosexual. So that is why we have it in the name of our program. And we will be talking about terminology at some point. Terminology is a constantly shifting landscape, and it's one of the ways to be a supportive and inclusive person, being aware of the terminology. So I thought I would start with that. So I was just going to see if we have the page for the Safe Schools program up here. Let's see, we're going to try that. Did that come up, the Safe Schools program there?
Yep, it's up, Jeff.
Yep, great. So this is I just wanted to put this out here because there are several resources on this page, as well as how to request training and technical assistance. You can get this on the Department of Ed's website just by Googling Mass Department of Ed, LGBTQ or Safe Schools Program for LGBTQ students. And there are a lot of resources, including the laws, the regulations, the policies, as well as the link to click on to request training and technical assistance. So we are still operating and providing training and technical assistance virtually right now. So feel free to use that as a resource in the future during this time. Okay. So now I'm learning how to do this. Melina, maybe you could help me how to get back to, oh, I see it. Thank you. Good. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to just begin with is by saying that I want to just share when I began doing this work, I started doing this work in beginning the Safe Schools program in 1993 at the Department of Education. This program is a joint initiative between the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed and the Mass Commission on LGBTQ Youth. The Mass Commission on LGBTQ Youth secures our funding, and the program has been based at the department since 1993. So we're very fortunate to have a state that's been a leader around these issues, and we've been a model for other states and cities to develop similar programs like this. When I was hired to at the department initially, it was to work for the HIV and AIDS prevention program. And I say that because in this time of this pandemic, we're reminded, or I'm very much reminded of what we were going through back then and during that period. And, you know, it makes me think back to, and I'm going to show this, this photo here of, I don't know, did that come up, Landon? I'm relying on Landon to tell me here.
Yeah, it's shared on the screen.
So this is a photo from the March on Washington from 1987, but that's me with my close friend Robin Ward. And I met Robin 40 years ago, and I consider it my coming out day because I was a senior at Northwestern and he was a freshman. And I met him, and he was the first person I met who was just unapologetically, openly, proudly gay. And although I knew I was gay before then, it was the day I celebrate my coming out day because meeting him made me want to be gay, want to be who I am and who I was. And Robin was the first person I met who got HIV and AIDS, and he died in 1988, just after that March on Washington at 25 years old. So I do this work in honor and memory of Robin. And I want to say that I think that there are many similarities to this time, but one of them is that in this time of incredible heartbreak and loss and depression and devastation, there are a lot of opportunities that we also are aware of, and a lot of kindnesses we see, and people rising to the occasion, and gratitude we're experiencing. And I think it's very complicated to hold all of these feelings together, the devastation and the heartbreak, along with the gratitude and the richness that we're in many of our lives. So I just wanted to begin with that to share that with you. So with that, so Landon, before we bring the panel on, I wanted you just to be able to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so like Jeff had said earlier, my name is Landon Callahan. I've been working with the Safe Schools program since I was a junior in high school. I went to a vocational technical high school where I studied early education. So every other week I would work with preschool students, and then I worked in a kindergarten classroom. And then my senior year, I actually got to do an internship co-op opportunity with the Safe Schools. So instead of going to school, I did trainings like this, technical assistance, and also some work more at the administrative level at the Department of Ed. So now I'm a senior in college. I'm still doing trainings now with Jeff, and thankfully we're able to do this today over Zoom. So it's good to see everyone here.
So I just wanted to mention something from the beginning, at the beginning here about the chat and the Q&A. As Margie said, we are recording this session, and we also are going to capture the chat and the Q&A too, because basically what we'd like you to use the chat for is we want to make this as interactive as possible. And as I always say, you are each other's best resource, and nowhere and at no time is this more important and clear than right now. So we really want you to use the chat to be able to share not only answers to our questions, but to share whatever, any strategies or resources that have been helpful to you at this time, specifically in supporting LGBTQ students and their families, but even broader than that. You know, I was just thinking about different articles or videos that have, and we'll refer to some of them that really have sustained my spirit during this time and been helpful to me in sort of describing just sort of what I feel I'm going through and what I want to be thinking about at this time. I feel that one of the real messages and learnings for me has been being more intentional about how I spend my time, energy, and intention. And as an extrovert who's constantly out there with people, developing my inner life a bit and really going inside and thinking about intentionally how I'm spending my time, energy, and attention. So one of those is actually being intentional about those things that sustain my spirit and fortify it. And I'd like you to use the chat to be sharing some of those strategies and resources with each other, as we will too. And then we will comb through the chat and compile that and get those back to you, as well as some of the other resources that are shared, slides and other resources that we think would be helpful to you afterwards. So basically we want you to use the chat for that, and we want you to use the Q&A feature for any specific questions that you would like any of us to address, or possibly even have people address in the chat. So that's one thing I just wanted to make clear there. So I think the other thing I just want to say from the beginning is that we are doing this for the first time. And I'd like to talk about the growth mindset fueling the way we do this work. And that means that any characteristic, any behavior can be developed as long as you put in enough effort. And that we celebrate doing things for the first time. We take on challenging situations as an opportunity to learn and grow. And we recognize and value mistakes as an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that it's important to have that context, because having a growth mindset is correlated with being more resilient. And certainly with the adversities we're facing right now, any strategies for being resilient, and I think that is one of the things that research really has supported, that we can develop and practice with each other and name, is helpful. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the growth mindset, but I want to put that out at the beginning, that that as many administrators, especially elementary school principals, have said, when a student has begun to socially transition and they're doing this for the first time or navigating that at their school, they say, I feel like I'm building the plane in flight. And I think it's a good metaphor to say that there's only so much we can plan in advance, And then there's a lot of learning that happens on our feet as we're going. So I think that it's a good metaphor for us to keep in mind. And certainly as we're doing this today, we're going to be learning as we're proceeding, as many of you are also learning new things and stretching us beyond our comfort zone. We often talk about our comfort, stretch, and panic zones, that most learning happens when we are in our stretch zone, when there's a level of discomfort. And I just want to recognize from the beginning that there is a lot of discomfort right now. And it's an opportunity to learn, and it's also an opportunity for us to be kind and gentle with ourselves and with each other, and to be compassionate. So self-care will be one of the things we are talking about too, in the different strategies people are using. They are things that we always talk about in our work, and now it is particularly relevant. So with that, I would like to ask you, before we introduce the panel, in addition to doing this anti-bullying work with the Safe Schools program for LGBTQ students, I also do some teaching in psychology, primarily in the area of positive psychology, and a course that I just finished in co-teaching for the Harvard Extension School on psychological resilience. And positive psychology really informs the way I do this work. And positive psychology is about shining a light on the bright spots. What does it look like when it's going well? And how do we create more of that? So our time together will really be about featuring a lot of those best practices, things that are working well, particularly during this time, and in general around supporting LGBTQ students and their families. So I hope you will be, again, sharing some of those things that you're already doing. I just spoke with, was in contact with a middle school GSA advisor this morning who talked about, or two advisors from two different schools actually, who are holding virtual GSA meetings for their students. And oh, I love seeing Ashley Waterberg, and one of our Commission on LGBTQ Youth members, who just in the chat mentioned what she's doing in her advisor, hosting virtual meetings as well as making bracelets for their students. So we hope you'll use the chat to share some of those success stories. And you'll be hearing a lot of them from us and from our panelists, as well as from each other.
Jeff, I saw there's a few questions that were in the chat. If people could just do that in the
Sure.
Q&A section, just so that they're saved so that we could see them, that would be great.
Excellent. Thanks, Landon. I appreciate Landon. When each of us is speaking, the other one will be monitoring some of the chat and Q&A. So thanks, Landon. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Landon, before I go to the next thing?
No, just the Q&A section, we'll save it so that we can all see. Some of the questions in the chat might get lost when more people message. So if people want their questions answered, that's a better place to put them.
Good. So positive psychology is not only about shining on the bright spots, what's working well, it's also about the value of positive emotions. There's all this research that shows if you have a regular gratitude practice, if you have a regular practice to elicit positive emotions, that in 4 weeks, there's not only psychological benefits, but physical benefits. Your blood pressure goes down, your cholesterol goes down, you start exercising more. So, and it also shows that you're more open, more creative, and more receptive. So in that spirit, I would just like you to think about 3 good things that have happened in the last 24 hours, 48 hours. If you need to go back more, that's okay. A month ago, we actually did an in-face workshop for 125 people. It was one of the last things we did in person for Mass Partnerships for Youth. So lots happened in the last month. But if you could think back, and again, this isn't only, it's not only about, sometimes good things can have a component to them that are also good things that happened in the light of very painful or what we think of as negative things. But just 3 good things that have happened, and the only other rule is nothing's too small. So I'd like you to take a minute to think about that, and if you're willing to share in the chat, one of your good things. So Landon, maybe I could have you read some of them.
Yeah, they're coming in pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Let's see. Playing board games, family time with Zoom. Let's see. Celebrating Easter virtually. Um, More time for baking and time with family. Looks like there's a lot of people spending time with family. Let's see, scavenger hunt with kids, more time with family, finished a good book. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people are sending them in all at the same time.
Good. Which one of yours, Landon?
I got to spend some time with friends last night in like a group FaceTime call. So it was good to just be able to like see someone, not just like talk on the phone. So that's been good.
Nice. I know for me, my friend asked me to go for a bike ride, and I thought, oh, we don't usually go for a bike ride. We go for walks. I don't have a bike, and I was like, I guess I could get one of those blue bikes that you rent for an hour or a couple hours across the street. And I thought to myself, okay, this is my stretch zone a little bit. Do it. And I was just so glad I did it. We went for a nice bike ride along the path, Fresh Pond to Arlington. So it was great to do something new. And I felt like, okay, this is sort of an example of approaching and not avoiding and getting into my stretch zone a little bit and being glad I did. All right, so with that, I would like to bring on the panel. So if to introduce themselves, and so maybe if the panelists could unmute yourself and unmute your video and come on the screen here. It's wonderful to see all the things in the chat, that all of people's good things. So as I talk about often in the workshops, that this is a good practice. So there's some feedback here. So yep, it stopped. So somebody might have figured out what that was. So I think it's a good practice, often to do with yourself and with your family. I think that also often, I often talk about it. My friend, which she would call me from California, and the conversation would be going down, and we'd be like, okay, 3 good things, and it would completely change the direction of the conversation. So I think that, as my yoga teacher says, practice makes practice. And if you do it on a regular basis, you start to notice some of the good things as well. So with that, I want to welcome the panelists. I'm so happy. So we have Lauren and Reese and Elijah and our Susan and Annabelle on too. To see if I can see everybody here. Oh yes, I can see everybody. Good. So what I would like to do is, so Elijah, I think we're getting some feedback, guys. Yep, thanks. So,
sorry, my family is just in the background.
That's all right. So we'll have you unmute when you speak, okay? So keep yourself muted for now, and then we'll have you unmute when you speak. Is all right? Good. So I just want to say, looking at this panel here, as I said, that when I was asked to do this, I thought, I feel like one of the real gifts of this work are the people that I get to work with. It's the main gift. And when we think about the number one factor that, when we talk about what contributes to resilience, we talk about positive emotions. We talk about the growth mindset. And the number one factor that consistently comes up in all research that is the most factor that contributes to resilience is social support, relationships, friends. Relationships matter. And when I was talking to my nephew, Seamus, this summer, he's in 6th grade and he was 11 at the time. I often tell Seamus stories. We were on the beach, seems like a whole nother day and time. And I asked him, I said, and he's an introvert, so I always have to pace how, so that I don't overwhelm him with all my questions interrogating him. But I asked him, I said, so what's the most important thing you learned in school this year? And he's into math and science. He put a computer together. So I thought it would be something related to that. And without hesitating, he said, how to make friends. And then he said, the friendships that extend outside of school. He said, I could teach myself everything else, but I needed school for that. So it just really heartened me that he recognized that was what was really important. And so often even relationships is gendered in our culture as something that females are raised to value more. And I often will ask, how often are boys raised to say that the most important factor that'll contribute to resilience and well-being in life, the men who live the longest and are happiest, are the ones who have fulfilling relationships? So I was really happy to hear my nephew say that his friendships were the most important thing. And when I just talked to him, he just turned 12 and he got an iPhone. And I said, so how's this working out for you, staying at home? And the first thing he said, since his phone was on his mind, he said, well, you know, I don't have the phone numbers of my friends at school. And so I miss that, being able to connect with them. So I say that right from the beginning when we're talking, because often I'll say that one of the most important things, and this is the first question that I've had to learn to ask when I get a call from a school or somebody asks me about supporting a particular student, the first question I ask, and I've had to learn this, is what is their friend situation and what can you do to possibly improve that? It's some of the things that you're already doing, and I think being intentional about that, it makes a difference. So at this time, when it's even more difficult to have that in mind around how you're facilitating social connections and helping friendships to develop or grow, that could sometimes be the most important thing to do for a young person. I say that in the context of this panel because this panel consists of my friends and people, young people, and their parents that have become my friends as well as colleagues in doing this work. So I really want to thank you because I feel like this is an example of really what works, and to be thinking in our own lives about how we're taking care of ourselves and our relationships, as well as how we're actually providing that for the people that we care about, the students and their families and our children. So with that, I would like the panel to introduce themselves, and I'd like you to share your name, your pronouns if you feel comfortable sharing them, what your connection is to being part of this webinar today and being on this panel, and one of your 3 good things that has happened in the last day. So how about if we start with Lauren up here, and then we'll go to Annabelle and Susan, to Reese, and to Elijah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren, and as Jeff said, I have been a friend to him and helping him with this work for a long time. I am the very proud mom of a 13-year-old transgender boy, and I'll be sharing my story with you. One of my good things is extra time with my family. I've been trying to really focus and be grateful for that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan. I'm the mom of Annabelle.
Hi.
I use she, her pronouns. And one of my good things from the last 24 hours is that yesterday we had a fire pit and did manicures outside.
Hi, I'm Annabelle. I'm 14. I use she, her, and pineapple pronouns. I'm a trans female, and one of my good things in the last 24 hours was getting to spend lots of time with my family.
Nice. Thanks, Annabelle and Susan. How about Reese?
Hi, my name is Reese Dahlberg. I am a mom of an 8-year-old transgender boy and an 8-year-old cisgender boy and a 13-year-old cisgender girl. one of my good things is that everyone in my house slept in their own beds last night. Really, really.
Nice. I just remembered, thank you, Reese, that I need to show people the first letter. So the first letter is H. I feel like I'm like on a game show or something. All right. So this says H, so it's capital H because there are 6 letters in this, and some of them are uppercase and some of them are lowercase. So this is an uppercase H. Anyway, I assume this is the way to do this, and then in a little bit I'll give you the second one so we can keep up to speed here. Okay. All right, Elijah. Wait, what happened to Elijah? Oh, there you are.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good.
Hi, I'm Elijah. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am the GSA support coordinator for Boston Public Schools. So if you're a BPS GSA advisor, please get my email so I can contact you. Because I'm trying to contact everybody so that we can all kind of get to continue doing GSA work during this time.
We're losing you a little bit, Elijah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Is there some background noise there? Because I want to make sure they hear you.
No.
And
no, everything's quiet. Can you hear me okay
yeah,
right now?
so I know that we had tried the other room too. That might be better. I'm not sure, but you're kind of going out and there's some static in the background. Yeah.
I'll try my headphones.
Yeah, I think that worked well when we did our tech rehearsal.
Hello?
Oh, that's great.
Can you hear me better? All right. All right. So I guess I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Elijah. I use him, his pronouns. I am the BPS or Boston Public Schools GSA advisor. So if anybody's in the who was attending is from Boston Public Schools, please try to contact me because I've been trying to get folks to continue doing the work with the GSAs, even though we're doing all of this like time with separation. So I don't, for all the GSA advisors in the chat who I've seen some of y'all, I really appreciate that you're still doing that work right now because that's exactly what our students really need. My one good thing today was, or in the last 24 hours, I got to spend a lot of time with my little brother. He's 20 years old, so I think as adults, a lot of, like, we kind of tend to grow apart, but we've been getting a lot closer, so I really appreciated that.
Good. So I was just looking at a couple of the chat questions. So some people are saying that my volume's going in and out, so hopefully we can work out some of the tech issues. I know that somebody had missed Susan and Annabelle. Pronouns, I'm Jeff, I use he and him. We're going to be talking about pronouns and about asking people, why, you may see it on people's email signatures. You may see people introducing themselves in meetings with their pronouns. People often have questions about asking people their pronouns. So Annabelle may want to share a little bit more about, because somebody had a question like, wait a second, was that real or is that a joke? Or what was, maybe Annabelle, you could explain a little bit more about what your own journey has been about using pronouns.
Okay, sure. So, in 4th grade, I had decided I wanted to use she pronouns, and that was all fine and dandy. I moved on to 5th grade. I was doing okay, and then I moved on to 6th grade, and I realized that, hey, this doesn't describe me anymore. I had felt like she, her did not describe the type of female that I wanted to be, and so I tried to find another pronoun to describe who I was inside and out, because when I changed my name, I felt that had matched me, but my pronouns they didn't seem to fit the characteristic of who I was. So when I had discovered pineapple and I had tried using it a little bit, it just kind of stuck. And I felt like nowadays when people ask me about it, I definitely say, yes, that is my pronoun. No, it's not a joke. I believe in everything that it stands for.
Awesome. So Annabelle and Susan, I think that since you're beginning this now, I think the next slide I'm going to try to put up is the one that Annabelle shows your progression, and then maybe have you walk people through like at what grade you were in each one, and sort of what sort of your experience was, as well as who was supportive with you along the way. So let's see whether I can do that right now.
So I'll just sort of give a little bit of background, because I know that there are some trans and non-binary folks that come out and say, this is who I am right away. And for Annabelle, it was definitely more of a gender evolution between the ages of 2 and 10. And so Annabelle was assigned male at birth. And so when she was born, the doctor said, it's a boy. But between 2 and 10, she really spent a lot of time demonstrating and having conversations with us that the doctors had actually made a mistake and she's a girl. But it was very sort of a slow progress. And so what does that look like at age 2? It's like she was obsessed with Ariel, but played with things that maybe you would have considered to be more appropriate for a preschool girl. Sort of, had more girlfriends, loved dress up, we used to call it flair, sparkle jewelry, whatnot. And so lots of well-intentioned people would say, oh, right, my kid went through a phase like that, or that's probably just part of like normal preschool development and exploration. But for us, the moment that I knew that something was different than just sort of typical preschool evolution was that one day at age 7, we were driving in the car with Annabelle, who at the time used a male birth name and male pronouns, and Annabelle's younger sister. And Annabelle said, hey, Mom, are girls involved? Girls have babies, right? And I said, technically, yes, women have children, but there's many ways to build a family. And then he said, okay, because when I grow up, I know I want a family, but I'm never going to get married, so I want to adopt. And I said, okay, because then he was 7. I said, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I'm curious as to why you think at age 7, you're never going to get married. And he said, well, because I would want to marry a man. And this was, 8 years ago, yeah. Before we had marriage equality. So I said, that's okay. We live in Massachusetts. Men can marry men and women can marry women. And he said, no, because if I were to marry a man, I would want to be the bride. And if I were the bride, then everyone would laugh. So I'm never going to get married, but I want to have a family. And so I said, well, the rule about weddings is you invite people that you love who love you in return. So when you grow up, if you want to marry a man and if you want to be the bride, everyone that would be there would be so happy that you found someone who you loved to build a life with that nobody would laugh. And he said, oh, that's a pretty good rule. Hey, do you think they're going to have that Amelia Bedelia book that I want at the library? And he completely moved on and was fine the rest of the day. But for me, that was where I was really like, I need to get more resources for us so that I can support my kid, because, there was something sort of more deeply going on there when a 7-year-old is making these kind of like major life plans for themselves to change sort of what they were thinking. And so that was sort of, we were in this murky period between 2 and 10 where we used a birth name and male pronouns until 3rd grade is when Annabelle, with a male name and male pronouns, started using the girls' room. 4th grade, switched her pronoun, and at the time didn't ask to change her name. She just said to me that she wanted to use her pronouns because they felt more appropriate. And at the time she asked me what her other name was going to be, because of course when we were pregnant with Annabelle, we didn't find out the baby's sex because we wanted to be surprised. So now, surprise, few times. And so she had said, what was my other name going to be? And I said, Annabelle. And then she said, that's cool. And then moved on. So kept a boy name, but girl pronouns for 4th grade. And then in 5th grade said, I'm ready to take my other name. So do you remember your sort of
I do.
school progression
Yes.
here?
And there's stories behind each and every one of these pictures. I can guarantee you that. So our first picture, I am in preschool. I remember that shirt very vaguely, but I remember wearing it.
You were 3.
I was 3. Well, that was like that was when I was in the murky period. It was, I don't know, I think there's just not much else to say about it. I was
Yeah.
just in the murky period.
I would talk
Okay.
about that one.
We're going to go right to 1st grade. That is the 3rd picture. That picture was in 1st grade. And for picture day, my mom was like, hey, you're going to wear that sweater. This is what you're going to be wearing. Have a great day. And I said to myself, no, I'm not. So when we got to school, I had an undershirt under the sweater, and I took off the sweater. And when it was time for picture day, I went in, and they took the photo with my plain white shirt and no sweater.
Yeah. I tried to pitch Argyle as diamonds to try to make it like, this is how men are fancy. They wear bow ties. They wear Argyle. You weren't buying it.
Nope.
No.
So when my mom found out, she was very angry. She punished.
Who does a school picture in an undershirt? Anyway.
She punished me with. She started picking out my clothes. I think that was the rule.
No. I didn't get you the light up sneakers that you wanted. That was your punishment.
Okay. That was
Anyway.
my punishment.
Okay. But
So 2nd grade, which is the next photo, I got to choose my outfit.
right.
I
We started letting you
We
grow your
started
hair.
growing out the hair. I remember I have a memory in 2nd grade at our old house. I was in little pigtails. That was my thing. I used to wear a bunch of little piggy tails. So that was when I was growing out my hair, and apparently 2nd grade Annabelle doesn't like to smile because that face was just
Tragic. All right.
tragic.
Then the next one.
The next photo was in 3rd grade. I had grown my hair out. I had picked that outfit out.
You were using the girls'
I
bathroom.
was using girls' bathroom. I remember we still have the headband that I was wearing in that. It's now
Special.
to my sister
Yeah.
right now. So that was just very fun. Then the next photo, that was in 4th grade, I remember.
Right, yeah. So that was female pronouns.
Female pronouns. I think that was like, out of all of these photos, definitely like my most real photo. Like that's kind of what I would wear now, like just sweater and just my hair however it is, and some form of silver necklace. I think that was the one photo that was really my favorite, and I think that was really like when I started figuring out who I was.
There you are. There you are in Lauren's kitchen on your phone. What was this, Annabelle? What was this photo?
Oh boy. So this was when I was, I think
You were in kindergarten.
I was in kindergarten. We had gone to Disney World for a weekend. This was my Halloween costume. I had wanted to be a princess.
Mhm.
So we're wearing this pink and purple like gown that we still own today. It's very itchy, but I felt like just myself in it.
Right. So we were still wearing boy clothes,
Yeah.
but we're wearing flair, but we went to Disney for Halloween and we found this dress for like $16 at Home Goods. And it was one of
Yeah.
those things where still wearing boy clothes, boy haircut, carried it up to the register with such reverence. And we were so lucky because the cashier didn't say, oh, is this for your sister? Or why are you a boy buying this dress? But the cashier admired its full splendor, which is like It has every bit of flair possible. There are like little silk, like rosebuds on it. It's velvet, it's glitter, it's satin. It's a lot going on. And when she brought it up, the person just complimented the fabric and her selection and then said, "Do you want me to put that in a bag?" And she was like, "No, I'm going to carry it." but that's Disney, right? That was
Disney. I remember in the same trip, I think that I had this one like very female feminine shirt. It was a picture of Ariel on it. It's kind of on another side note, but I felt that was just one of my other like my female shirts that I loved wearing that shirt.
Great. So Annabelle, the last question before we move on is, I want to know if you could give any thank you or shout out to any teachers or other people who've supported you that have helped things to go well for you.
We've made a list. So for teachers, I want to thank my 3rd grade teacher, Miss McCrae, who who gave me a tour of the girls' bathroom when I was starting to want to use it, and who would give me little nudges when it was just kind of quiet traffic time.
While she was kind of making that transition, because when she said she wanted to use the girls' room, she expressed concern that she would make other kids feel uncomfortable because they had always known her to use the boys' room. So she really took like the mystery out of that by bringing her in the bathroom and showing her around and then trying to help her navigate like low traffic times.
Yeah. Until then, I just stood up in front of the class and said, "I'm using the girls' bathroom now. You better deal with it."
Yeah, she made an announcement to her entire class. And when I asked why, you said to everyone, like, I can use whichever bathroom I feel comfortable with, and the principal knows, and the teachers know, and my parents know, and everyone says it's okay. And I said, I'm curious why you shared that. And you said, because I felt like I was keeping a secret and I didn't want to carry a secret anymore. So that was Miss McRae, who's awesome.
Next, we have Miss Keefe. Miss Keefe was my 4th grade teacher. She's actually my sister's 4th grade teacher now. She's still one of my most favorite teachers. She led a circle discussion when I had wanted to, start using female pronouns. So she's just always kind of been there, and she's always had this motto, spread sunshine and spread kindness. And I think with her being there, I think I wouldn't have really felt comfortable with the other teachers, because some of the 4th grade teachers were a little iffy, not gonna lie, but Miss Keefe was my favorite, and she's definitely also the nicest. Then we had, in 5th grade at my school, we had like dual teachers. So we'd have one teacher who teaches you half of the subjects, the other teaches you the other half, supposed to get you ready for middle school. So my 2 teachers were Miss Goodwin and Miss Brennan. They were very special to me because I have 2 memories. You only told me to tell one, but I have 2 with them. The first one was when I wanted to change my name. So prior to changing my name, I told my mom. I might have told a couple of friends. And so the Friday before we were planning to tell the class, who would then tell the school and stuff, they had told me, "Hey, come have lunch with us." So I went down to the lunchroom, bought my bagel pizza, turned around, and was just like, "Okay, bye, friends." So I went down and sat with them, and they just like kind of talked to me about like how they could help, and like how like they wanted me to, or like how they like asked me how I wanted to do it and stuff. So that they were just very helpful and very like understanding, making sure I felt comfortable. And then they also bought me a donut and a plate that they wrote my name on, which I'm positive I have somewhere still. I'm 99.9% positive.
I don't want to know that. Okay.
So they've always been there for me, and I think to this day, whenever I get to see them, I get so happy.
They were also the first teachers that she had that I knew that actually went out and read some transgender memoirs to sort of try to understand a little bit what the experience was like. So they actually, on their own volition, had found the Becoming Nicole memoir of Nicole Maines and her family, and they read that on their own, where we have family members that have never read a trans book, but some of her teachers had.
And Susan, maybe you can also, Susan and Annabelle, just interrupt for a second. You had also mentioned the counselor that called since you've been home, just bringing it up to now. And then Annabelle, you can
And
finish with any other. Thank you.
So in middle school, we have a great social worker at her middle school who helped us before she entered. We had a meeting the June prior with all the administration to talk about how they could support Annabelle. And so since this has all started, so she's been a strong support to us all through middle school. And then even once we were out of school, I think maybe we'd been out of school for like 4 days, and she called to check in and see how we were coping and to see how Annabelle was doing, and then asked to talk to Annabelle to speak to her, which was really special. And then another great middle school teacher that has supported Annabelle and every kid is her choir teacher, Ms. McDermott, who I think is a great model for how you can remove gender from classrooms, because when she sent out the notice in the fall about proper choir attire, she said performers, not boys and girls, performers should wear a white top, preferably with a collar, and a black bottom. And she gave examples of white tops and black bottoms and dress shoes. There was no gender, there was no girls should wear this or boys should wear that. It was like, these are the ideal kind of components. And so that way, like, Annabelle's trans and she felt like, hi, I can pick whatever I want. And there are some non-binary students in the choir that I'm sure that made them feel good, but also even for cisgender kids, if you're not a girly girl and you don't want to be forced into wearing a black skirt, I think that was just a great model.
Yeah. I saw just one question in the chat that like popped to me when I quickly viewed it a second ago, which was, do you take hormones? And I've currently been on estrogen for, I want to say 3-ish, 4-ish weeks now. The only problem I've noticed with I'm taking a fourth of the patch, and the only thing I've noticed with it is that just needs a little help sticking on sometimes. So
Too wiggly.
yeah, too wiggly.
But no, we get care at Children's Hospital. And so we had a hormone blocker to pause puberty, especially while we were in this gray area at age 11, to buy us more time to explore her gender under the care of therapists and psychiatrists. And then, so then it's just now, that was from like 11. And so now she's almost 15. And so we just started estrogen because you have to pick a puberty, and puberty is still binary.
Yes. Almost 15, 1.5 years until I'm out on the road. So get ready.
So Annabelle, I wanted to make sure I didn't cut you short. Was there anybody else you wanted to give a shout out to before we move on?
Yes, I'd like to give a shout out to some of my friends. First, my friend Nat. I've known her since 3rd grade. She's always been there to me. She's always been nice to me. She's always like understood me. I'm crying. Oh my God.
She came to your first youth pride.
She came to the first youth pride with us. And she's always been there for me. I'd also like to thank my friend Emmeline, who's been my friend since preschool, and she's known me through thick and thin. She's been without me through my entire changing experience, and she's always just been a nice person to talk to, and she's always been very supportive of me. I'd also like to thank my grandparents. Yes, I know, I'm just gonna go on and on. Someone stop me, please.
And the Emmy goes to.
I know they had a tough time knowing who I was, which I didn't find out until like I was 12, and I was kind of shook at first. I want to thank them for always accepting me and loving me no matter what.
Thank you, Annabelle and Susan. I have to say, I'm just so moved to hear your story. And I think that it just is proof that fear does not have the last word. It may be the way the day begins. It's not the way the day ends. You are so inspiring that fear has not come in the way of you being your authentic self. You are proof that we can do hard things, that even when things happen that are not what we had expected, that we can rise to the occasion. Susan, you are just proof that people that one of the most important factors that contributes to a young person's well-being is a parent's love and support, that we're all better off when we're loved for who we are. And Annabelle, it's just wonderful to see you thriving like this. Maybe I should show that photo from Youth Pride if I can show that. Is that the photo that your friend was with you at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the one?
Here we go.
Uh-oh. Is that Youth Pride?
Yes.
Yeah.
My
There
friend.
you are.
Yes.
And your sister, that's your sister there with you too, right?
My sister is next to my mom with her little hat. And then the person on my, I don't know.
To the left of you.
To the left of me.
In
that
the
is-
unicorn leggings.
In the unicorn leggings. That's my friend Nat.
Nice. So this is wonderful. So let's move. There's Lauren and Alex right there. So let's move to Lauren now. And so this was from Youth Pride. Was this last year or the year before?
I think maybe 3 years ago.
Oh, 3 years. Wow. So this takes place in May every year. It'll have to happen virtually this year. So, okay, let's move on to you, Lauren, and I will see what I can get up here of any of your photos before we move back to you. But you can begin, briefly telling your story, what has been helpful, and
Sure.
where you are now.
So again, my name is Lauren, and Jeff, thanks for having me. I am, as I mentioned, I am the very proud mom of a 13-year-old transgender boy, and I'm also the mom of an 11 and 9-year-old cisgender daughters. Alex's journey is similar, but also very different from Annabelle's in that his presentation as a male started very young and was very insistent, persistent, and consistent as strongly masculine from a very young age. I can remember as soon as he could speak, he was making choices with what he wore, with what TV shows he liked, with what Halloween costumes he chose, and they were all very stereotypical male choices. And I think it was easy at that young age to say he was a tomboy, and that's what we understood at that point in the journey. Was we didn't yet understand what gender identity was. We understood what gender presentation was, and we saw our child, who was assigned female at birth, presenting as a male, and that meant to us at the time that he was a tomboy. That worked for a few years, 2, 3, 4. The choices became stronger and stronger. Once he got to kindergarten, we started to notice his behavior shifting. He had some social anxiety. He bit his nails ferociously. He started sleepwalking. He started behaving, he started having trouble with social relationships, and that was manifesting in some poor behavior in school, which was very, very new to us. In retrospect, I think what was happening was that he was starting to realize that even though he knew he was a boy, the world around him didn't see it that way, and he was resisting that. We continued to think he was a tomboy, but we also started to explore what might be causing his anxiety. We saw some different specialists and tried to explore what might be going on. And while we were assured that he was okay and all the tests were coming back fine, none of the specialists we saw really gave a lot of attention to the gender presentation that I would always bring up. So I just kind of kept moving on and kept telling myself that I had a tomboy and that everything would be okay. But I think deep down in my gut, I really, truly knew it was more. I just wasn't ready yet to admit that. Starting in 2nd grade is when I remember Alex becoming more adamant about what he wore, and he begged me on a daily basis for a boy haircut. I finally broke down and we had a lot of hand-me-downs from our cousin, our female cousin, and those always worked okay for him. He would always gravitate towards the blue and more masculine clothes. But finally in second grade, he said, I can't wear any of this. So I took him to the Gap. We spent a couple $100 and came home with a full wardrobe of clothes from the boys section. I remember walking into my bedroom at one point and finding him staring at himself in my full-length mirror in orange basketball shorts, a graphic t-shirt, and I saw a smile on his face that I hadn't seen in a long time. He was looking at himself with such joy. So again, I said that told myself he was a tomboy, but something deep down was continuing to eat at me. That summer, after his second grade year, we moved to a new home, and that his behavior over that summer was really at an all-time low. I chalked it up to moving and that being difficult for him. But the first night in our new house, we were all upstairs on the second floor. Everyone was in their bedrooms unpacking boxes, and he was yelling at his sisters, saying, no girls allowed in my room. Everyone out, no girls allowed. And I walked in to try to help with the commotion, and he was just so agitated. And my 3-year-old, my youngest, who was 3 at the time, looked at him and said, but you are a girl. And he started sobbing and said, no, I am not. Everyone thinks I am a girl and I am not. He became more and more upset. I think it all just came out. I took him downstairs away from everyone else, and I said, is this what's been going on? Is this what is making you so upset and so sad? And he said, yes, it is. I'm a boy and no one believes me. It's all I wish for, is that people see me as a boy. So that's really my aha moment. I think all of us parents have talked about the one particular moment in time where we really realize that there's something more going on. And that was the moment for me. He was 8 years old. So that is when the next day I took him to get a short haircut, a boy haircut. I found Jeff, thankfully. I found other parents. Susan was the first parent I met. I reached out to the school and let them know what was going on. I found in our elementary school extraordinary support. They told my husband and I that this was new for them, that they weren't experts, but that they would walk with us every step of the way and figure it out. And that's exactly what they did. We spent his third grade year really educating ourselves, surrounding ourselves with support, experts, parents, Jeff, using the school to help guide us. And on the last day of third grade, he formally socially transitioned, which meant we changed his pronouns to he, him, his, and his name, he had already been going by Alex, and he already had been presenting as fully male, but June 19th, 2015 was the official social transition day, and what I like to think of as his rebirth day, and it's a day we celebrate every year. He is doing extraordinarily well as himself. Similar to Annabelle, he received a puberty blocker about 3 years ago, which was inserted into his arm and blocked his female puberty. And also similar to Annabelle, about 4 weeks ago, he started testosterone injections at a low dose. We just had the third injection last night, and it's just very exciting. It's seeing your child go from being so unhappy and so unsure of who they are, or I shouldn't say that, he's always known who he is, being unsure of his place in the world, to moving forward to someone who's living so authentically with so much joy is truly the most beautiful thing I've ever seen and experienced in my life. And I'm so incredibly proud of him. I know it won't be easy, and I know we'll continue to have obstacles down the road, but I just keep coming back to the place of gratitude that I find with just seeing him as his authentic self and seeing the joy that brings him and everyone around him.
Mm. Thank you, Lauren. Just so that I keep up to speed and we catch up a little bit, I want to give you your next two letters. So the next letter is an E, a capital E. So that's the second one. And then the third one is a capital N. Okay, so you have number 2 and number 3 are E, capital E, and then the third one's a capital N. So Lauren, thank you so much. And again, I think that this raises the question around social and medically transitioning, and I appreciate that it was respectfully asked in the chat, because we often, I'll have Landon actually talk about this some more, about what the etiquette is around that. But I thought that it would be good for us now to talk just a little bit about terminology, because we've been using some terms now, and I think it's good to do a little bit of an educational piece around that. So Landon, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about your experience as it's related to the terminology, as well as social and medically transitioning, and we'll move on from there. So thanks so much, Lauren, and then we will address some of the questions that have come up in the chat.
Yeah, so did you want to pull up the definitions, Jeff, that we can go through?
Maybe you could just say something about social and medically transitioning now while I'm getting this up here.
Yeah, so when we talk about transition, we tend to focus on the social aspect. So kind of what Lauren had said and Annabelle had talked about as well. Those are things that don't just affect the transgender person, but it affects, how we interact with that person. So things like, pronouns, what bathrooms people are using, what locker rooms, maybe their appearance, things like hairstyles, clothes, those things that are gendered in our culture. So that's what we talk about when we say a social transition. And that's usually what the school should really be focused on, because that's how you, kind of interact with that person respectfully. When we talk about medical transition, we tend to not focus on it for a few reasons. One is just that it's personal. People's medical history is their own business. And if they choose to share that, then that's their choice. But again, people aren't entitled to know those things about people's medical history. Obviously, in situations and contexts like this, it's appropriate to ask, but just in general, asking people about their medical transition, unless you have that personal relationship with them, probably isn't always appropriate. Another reason we don't tend to focus on it is that, it can be really inaccessible. Some people want to medically transition, but they can't because of either their financial status. A lot of insurances don't cover it. And if they do, there might be a lot of hoops that people have to go through. And especially young people, if they don't have family support or an adult to help them navigate insurance, it can be really difficult to get hormones or reassignment surgeries. And also, not all transgender people medically transition. Everyone's transition looks different. For a lot of people, it involves medical transition and social transition, but some people, they feel comfortable just using different pronouns and going by a different name, and they don't need the medical aspect of it. They don't have a lot of body dysphoria is what we call it. So those are some reasons why we don't talk about it. But in this context, there's a lot of questions. Some, maybe people have misinformation around what medical transition looks like. So there's a few different avenues for transgender girls, like what Annabelle was saying. Estrogen is the feminizing hormone that transgender girls or feminine transgender people will go through, that puts them through a typical female puberty. So things like breast development, body weight distribution, things like that. For transgender boys, transgender men, testosterone is the predominantly male hormone. So that can be done as an injection, like as Lauren was saying, that's kind of the most common, but there's also testosterone gels and patches that people use. And the earliest medical intervention is pre-puberty. So when we talk about young transgender kids, elementary school, middle school, we're not talking about performing surgery on kids. The earliest medical intervention might be pre-puberty, where a doctor might determine that a child's going through the first stages of puberty, and they might prescribe them a hormone blocker, which is an implant that delays the onset of puberty. And really, that's just to buy that family and that child time to decide if they want to continue medically transitioning with cross-hormone therapy, or if they want to go through the puberty that's consistent with their sex assigned at birth. And so for transgender kids, hormone blockers can be a really important part of medical transition, because it's usually around that age that mental health problems can be exacerbated around puberty. Things like suicidal ideation and significant mental health problems can correlate with puberty. If you're going through a puberty that's not consistent with how you feel about yourself, that can be really traumatic. And also, if you take a hormone blocker, you don't have to go through puberty twice. So for me, I started testosterone when I was 15 or 16. And so I had already been through, a female puberty. So it was kind of too late for me to take a hormone blocker. But if I had been on a hormone blocker a couple of years prior, I wouldn't have had to kind of go through that experience. And the younger the intervention is, kind of the better the outcomes are. If you've never developed breast tissue as a transgender guy, and then you go on testosterone, you might not need chest reconstructive surgery. So that kind of brings us into surgeries and other medical procedures. People tend to ask, like, did you have the surgery? When in reality, there's hundreds of surgeries transgender people may or may not decide to undergo. I can really only speak from my experience. For the transgender men, transgender boys, that community, the most common procedure is top surgery. So that's chest reconstructive surgery to remove breast tissue. There's a few different options. Some of them leave more visible scarring, some don't. It really depends on how much breast tissue you have. And so I had that done when I was entering my freshman year of college. Because of insurance and things like that, we ended up getting denied 2 different claims. It took about 3 years to actually get surgery done. And thankfully, I had the help of a transgender legal firm that helped deal with insurance appeals and things like that. And my lawyer was actually a transgender person who had underwent top surgery. So that was really beneficial for me, because talking to people who aren't transgender about trying to get healthcare, my family and my doctors, they could understand, but they couldn't fully empathize with how necessary it was. So it can be kind of exhausting dealing with people saying, well, can you wait another year or 2, or is this really necessary? So to have a transgender lawyer or a transgender doctor or somebody who can help you who's been through that was really affirming. So medical transition, for testosterone, things like that, that would just put a transgender boy through a typical male puberty. So their voice might deepen, facial hair, male pattern baldness, anything that comes with a typical male puberty. And that can really help alleviate discomfort that people feel with their bodies. And like Lauren said, her son is on a lower dose. It's really important that people are working with an endocrinologist, a hormone specialist, to decide what dosing is right, because everyone's body is different. Doses change throughout people's lives. So it's really important to have supportive doctors who can understand transgender healthcare. So to go through some definitions, just so that people are on the same page, language is always evolving. And one of the best ways to show that you're a supportive adult is to just be aware of some of the definitions of sexual orientations, gender identities. So the first one on this continuum is biological sex. People tend to have an idea of what that is. We're talking about things like hormones, chromosomes, genes, secondary, primary sexual characteristics. And we tend to think of that as the most binary of these definitions, where a baby's born, the doctor, even before a baby's born, the doctor can look at external genitalia and say, you have a boy or you have a girl. But like with most things involving us as a species, it's not always as black and white. So there's a significant population of people who are intersex. People might be familiar with the term hermaphrodite. That technically by definition means you have two fully formed sets of reproductive organs. And for people, that's not possible. Certain fish and insects and things like that can be hermaphrodites, but people can be intersex, which might mean having ambiguous genitalia that might be corrected at birth surgically, but it can also look like having chromosomes or hormones that we don't typically associate with that person's assigned sex at birth. So for a lot of times, intersex people might not know they're intersex until they're going through puberty. They might be experiencing hormonal changes that aren't consistent with what we would expect. So, someone assigned male at birth developing breast tissue, or someone assigned female at birth developing facial hair, things like that. That's on the intersex continuum. That's a medical diagnosis. It can look like a lot of different things. Some people don't even know that they're intersex until maybe they're trying to have kids, they're having fertility issues, and they find out that maybe they have two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome. So intersex is kind of an umbrella term for somebody whose biological sex does not necessarily fall under male or female. Intersex people aren't necessarily transgender, or LGBT, because it is a medical condition, but the reason why we mention that is that we have no idea what's under people's clothes. We have no idea what people's hormones are. Some people don't even have any idea what their own genes and chromosomes are because they didn't go through any sort of testing or things like that. So that's when we talk about biological sex. That's an assignment that's made, and it's entirely based on your biology. We differentiate that from gender identity, which is how you think of yourself as a boy or a girl, a man or woman, both or neither. So in our culture, we tend to assume that if you're assigned male at birth, you're going to identify as a boy or a man. You're assigned female at birth, you're going to identify as a girl or a woman. And gender identity can really look different across different time periods, across different cultures. But for our definition of transgender, that's when someone's biological sex does not consistently align with their gender identity. So if someone identifies with a gender other than the gender they were assigned at birth, they can use the term transgender. So what we've talked about so far is, binary trans people, like Alex, somebody who was born female identifies as male, a transgender boy, or somebody who was born male identifies as female, that's a transgender girl. So just so we're aware, the prefix, the boy or girl aspect of that, that's how they identify now. So when I say I'm transgender, I'm a transgender man, people will ask me, are you transitioning to be female? No, the man part of trans man is how someone identifies now. Which, just to be aware of the language aspect, is good because there can be some confusion around that. Non-binary is kind of an umbrella term where male and female don't necessarily work to describe someone's gender identity. They could maybe align more with manhood or womanhood, or totally not align with either, or a mix of the two. But non-binary just means that those boxes don't work for that person. So because non-binary can be such a broad spectrum of identities, under the right circumstances, you could ask that person, what does that mean to you? And a lot of times for non-binary people, their transition might look different. They might prefer to use a gender neutral bathroom. They might prefer to use gender neutral pronouns. There were some questions around that. The most common sort of non-binary gender neutral pronoun would be they, using that in a singular way. So, if Jeff used they, them pronouns, I would say, they have flags behind them right now, or they're sitting in front of a bookshelf. You use that instead of he or him or she or her. And, we use that all the time in language. We say, we don't say he or she left his or her phone here. We say they left their phone here. But when you try to do it intentionally, it can get kind of tricky, but really the number one thing is just putting in the effort. A lot of non-binary students are not expecting people to get their pronouns right automatically, that it is a learning curve. So if you're putting in the effort and showing that you're taking the time to try to learn that, that's a good way to show that you're a supportive adult. So that's gender identity, how someone thinks themselves as a boy or girl and they're man or woman. When we talk about gender identity, people will often ask, how does somebody know that they're transgender at such a young age? That we have 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds transitioning socially. How do they know? And right now the research is pretty consistent that all children, regardless of if they're transgender or not, are aware of their gender identity. They have a strong sense of who they are as a boy or a girl, both or neither, by the age of 4, often as early as ages 2 or 3. So if you think back to either your own children or young children that you've had experience working with, they can vocalize and know who they are at a very young age. And so when we talk about transgender people, even transgender people who transition much later in life, they might look back and say, you know, I didn't transition until I was 30, but, you know, I knew when I was 4. And that's a pretty common experience. Again, you know, not everyone knows that early. And a lot of times, you know, if you're a 4 or 5-year-old and you're assigned male at birth, you're wearing a dress, and your family is saying, you know, you're never going to leave the house wearing that. That's not appropriate. You're probably not going to be vocalizing that. So just so folks know that at around 4 or 5 years old, students are aware of their gender identity. They may not be telling people or expressing it based on the messages that they're receiving at home or in school or in their community. The more supportive a family is, the more comfortable kids might be to vocalize that. So, you know, that's why we have students transitioning younger and younger, because their parents listen to them and say, you know, I understand that this is an integral part of your identity. So that's gender identity. We differentiate that from gender expression, where we've come a long way in our culture that based on your biological sex, that doesn't necessarily determine your gender expression. In our culture, pretty much everything is gendered, everything from, you know, the shoes we wear, the hairstyles we have, the movies we like, the food we eat, that's all gendered. And we're kind of making progress that we're seeing that, you know, while gender expression is important, it's also kind of made up, that men can, you know, wear makeup or be teachers, women can wear pants or be scientists or presidents or, you know, do manual labor, that the gendered expectations don't necessarily work for everyone. So for transgender people, the real difference is that, you know, people will say, what's the difference between a tomboy or a feminine boy and a transgender boy or girl? And Lauren and Annabelle and Susan kind of touched on this, that there's a significant amount of discomfort and distress when these students can't transition. A tomboy is just a girl, knows she's a girl, but prefers to be more masculine, maybe doesn't like traditionally feminine things. You know, there are boys who are more feminine, but they know that they're boys. And so that's kind of the difference between somebody who's just gender nonconforming and someone who's transgender. I think it's pretty common for when children are exploring their gender to just say, well, they're just a tomboy or tom girl. And that might be true for some people, but when there's a significant amount of distress, when there's, you know, problems sleeping, problems in school, stuttering, mental health problems, that's when we might look and see if we started calling this child a pronoun that's more consistent with their gender identity. A lot of times those mental health symptoms and those negative kind of experiences diminish, where things like Lauren gave a good example of, like, you know, Alex being very anxious and depressed, and then being able to dress in a way that's consistent with his gender identity really relieved a lot of that. Or, you know, getting a haircut or being called the right name and pronouns. So when we talk about gender expression, that's how someone expresses their gender. There's also a tendency to think that, okay, if someone transitions, you know, from male to female, they're going to be very feminine. They're going to want to wear dresses. They're going to want to have long hair. And for a lot of people, that is true, because gender expression is how we show people what our gender is. Like, I have facial hair so people know, okay, I'm a man. I dress the way I do so that people know, but also just because that's what I like to do. If I were to wear makeup or put on a dress, I would still be a man, even though I'm trans. So a lot of times transgender people, their gender expression is consistent with their gender identity, but it doesn't have to be. So people might be confused and say, well, you were assigned female at birth, you identify as male, why do you still wear a dress? Boys can wear dresses whether they're transgender or not. So it's important to look at these as all separate continuums, even though a lot of times we can kind of guess one from the other. It's not true for everyone. So the last sort of area of definitions I just want to go over quickly was sexual orientation. That's another area where, you know, in our culture right now, we've had this conversation for a while, especially in Massachusetts. Same-sex marriage has been legal here for many years, one of the first states to do that. So this is something that people might have a little bit more confidence in discussing. So when we talk about sexual orientation, we're talking about who someone is attracted to sexually or romantically. And so that's a little bit different from gender identity, where gender identity students know at a very young age, you know, preschool. Sexual orientation is a little bit later right now. research is showing between the ages of around 9 and 11, students are aware of who they're romantically or sexually attracted to. If they're not straight, they're not disclosing that information until around 12, 13, or 14. Again, that really looks different based on, if someone is in a school with a GSA and has supportive parents, they might come out at 10 years old versus somebody who is in an environment where that stuff is not accepted. They might not come out till later in life. So in general, though, entering middle school, students are aware of their sexual orientation. If they're not straight, they're usually not telling anybody till the end of middle school. So upper elementary school to early high school is really when sexual orientation, exploring those different labels might come into play. So words like lesbian, gay, bisexual, straight, those are examples of sexual orientation. Bisexual, pansexual, those are some new terms. They both refer to people who are attracted to people of all genders, attracted to people regardless of gender, attracted to people of multiple genders. Pansexual is just kind of a newer word that some people are using, but it kind of overlaps with bisexual. So just so people are familiar with that. And also, if you do have a student who's identifying their sexuality in a term that you're not familiar with, you can look it up. You can ask them in a private setting, do you mind kind of explaining to me what that means? Just so that you can have a better understanding. And the last piece on sexual orientation is just that when we talk about sexual orientation, we're talking about people's gender identity. So even though I was assigned female at birth, I identify as a man and I'm attracted to women. So I don't identify as a lesbian because I'm not, even though I was assigned female at birth, that's not how I identify. So if you have a transgender woman assigned male at birth, identifies as female, if she's attracted to other women, she would probably use a word like lesbian because she's a woman. So people's gender identity trumps their sex assigned at birth when we talk about gender or sexual orientation, because like we said, we have no idea what's under people's clothes unless someone tells us or something like that. So sexual orientation, people might say, you're transgender, does that mean you're gay? Transgender people can be of any sexual orientation, and that their gender identity is how we're using that language, if that makes sense to people. Jeff, you're muted.
Yep. The only other thing I wanted to add around pansexual is it's a sexual orientation that is meant to be more inclusive of being attracted to people of different gender identities. So not only regardless of their biological sex, but to be more inclusive of different gender identities. So you may hear young people say, I'm attracted to people, not parts, or hearts, not parts. So that may be one of the things that you're learning from this. Landon, could you also define cisgender and sort of spell that for people and say why that word has come into being?
Yeah, so like Jeff mentioned, the word cisgender, spelled C-I-S gender, and that's a word that we use to describe somebody who's not transgender. So just like when we talk about sexual orientation, straight people have a sexual orientation, white people have a race, able-bodied people have an ability, and the absence of labeling it kind of helps to enforce a culture where dominant groups remain dominant, where they're not examined, they don't have to label it. Straight people don't have to tell people their sexual orientation because it's assumed. So for transgender people, having a word like cisgender to mean not transgender can help us from kind of reverting back to saying something like, this person's trans and this person's normal, or this person's average, or this person's typical. It's a way to acknowledge that most people are cisgender, most people don't transition, and by not being transgender, there are some areas of life that are not as complicated. People who can go into a bathroom and not necessarily have to worry about being questioned or harassed, people who don't have to go through name changes, or people who don't have to deal with doctors dismissing their gender identity. So it's a way of acknowledging kind of the power and privilege that cisgender people have, where there are certain things that people might take for granted. Just looking at some of these questions real quick, there were questions around side effects of medical interventions like puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are completely reversible. So if a student decides that they don't want to further their medical transition by doing cross-hormone therapy, the puberty blocker can be taken out and they would just resume puberty as their sex assigned at birth. Usually puberty blockers are not really meant to be a long-term solution, really just for a couple of years to buy that student time. And let's see, there was another question. Struggling to use they, them pronouns because they're plural. Yeah, I think that's another area where it's just something that we're not used to. So just practicing using they, them, and just using it in the right form, like the object form still exists. You don't say like, give they their paper. You would say, give them their paper. So there was just one more question. Asexual, somebody who doesn't experience sexual or romantic attraction. That's different from pansexual. Pansexual and bisexual, meaning you're attracted to people of more than one gender. So there's lots of different words that people use to describe their sexual orientations. And if there are terms that people are unfamiliar with, just Googling them or asking a student, a lot of times there's questions around the word queer. Like Jeff had kind of said earlier, that's a word that kind of has a long, complicated history where if someone's using that word to describe their sexual orientation, they're probably saying that they're not straight. I would say really only use the word queer if you're talking about it in the sense of like the name of a program, or if you know that that person's comfortable using that language, because not everybody is comfortable with it. Like I don't identify as queer. If someone calls me that, I would consider that to be derogatory, but I also have friends who that's how they identify their sexual orientation. So really it's about the context around it. And when we're talking about like the Safe Schools program for LGBTQ students, that's, it's really just about context. And if you hear students saying, well, you're so queer, that's probably being said in a derogatory way versus someone saying, I identify my sexuality as queer. You know, not everyone's comfortable reclaiming that word, but if people have reclaimed it for themselves, then that's totally appropriate to mirror that back.
Great. Oh, so I'm going to give, just to catch up a little bit here, thanks so much, Landon, for going through that. I'm just going to give the next two letters right now. So you have 3 of them already. And the next 2 are Y and Y, a capital Y. And then the next one is a U, which is a small u, lowercase u. So uppercase Y and lowercase u. So you now have 5 of the 6 letters. Great. And Landon was just mentioning that that sort of where we were with, I'm just going to show this up quickly here. This is the student anti-discrimination law that came about in the wake of the civil rights movement in the early 70s that had 5 categories at that time: race, color, sex, religion, and national origin. And in 1993, sexual orientation was added as a protected category, largely because of the advocacy of students, the Student Advisory Council. They filed the bill and lobbied for its passage. And fast forward almost 20 years later, in July of 2012, gender identity was added as a protected category. So what we like to say is equal, that you cannot treat a student as being equal in all areas of their life except the ones that make people uncomfortable, which tend to be bathrooms, locker rooms, overnight accommodations, curriculum, athletics, without undermining the rest. So we often talk about the discomfort and often accompanies new groups getting their civil rights. It's not a reason to treat people inequitably. So schools should be places of constructive discomfort that are arenas to help people to learn. When women got the right to vote 100 years ago, people were uncomfortable. When interracial couples started becoming more visible, or same-sex couples got married and had kids, going to proms, people were uncomfortable. It was not a reason to treat people inequitably. It's an opportunity to learn and grow. So if somebody says, I don't know if I'm comfortable with a transgender girl using a girl's bathroom, I often say, why would you be? This is new, and discomfort's an opportunity to learn. So I think we want to create environments that are welcoming and inclusive of everyone. When Annabelle and Susan talked about the ways in which the school had shown that they were supportive, whenever your identity is steeped in secrecy or invisibility, anything that creates visibility matters. So whether it's in your language, in the environment, whether it's flags, whether it's, I think I'll go back to this, whether it's like safe zone stickers, what do I have here? safe zone stickers. People have things that have created visibility because people are scanning for safety. They're looking for any clue that you are a visible, supportive person, whether it's in your language, in your forms, in the books that you have, in your curriculum, in what you respond to. We often talk about stop it, name it, claim it. If you hear derogatory terms, say that's unacceptable, that's hurtful language, I'm offended by that. In our classroom, we don't use language like that. In our school, we want everybody to feel safe and included and welcome. Stop it, name it, claim it. It can be a comfortable, it could be a good mnemonic for remembering how you might be able to respond quickly. All right. So with that, we are going to move on to Elijah, and I think his mom might be there, be able to introduce herself as well. So with that, what we're going to do is have Elijah speak briefly about the journey that his mother went through in loving her son, and then we will have Reese speak a little bit about her experience, and then talk about some resources that are available to you, and wrap up. So I'm so happy, Omalara, that you are here. It was so wonderful to meet you, and I'm so glad that you're here, able to join Elijah. The connection seems a little bit off. Can you speak into your use your earpiece? And I think that will be a little bit better.
A little bit without the earpiece.
I'll use one while you use one. Maybe
Only because the microphone is right here. There's only like one small microphone.
That's good. Okay,
Can you
good.
hear
Let's
us
try it.
okay right now?
You're
Can you
going
hear
in
us
and out a
okay
little bit.
just use the
You're going in and out a little bit. Yeah. It's great to have both you here. I spoke with Omalari and Elijah over the weekend, and so they're giving you if the microphone is away from the computer, you all hear us okay? How's it sound? No, it's worse. It's worse?
I think we might have to do it this way, and hopefully you'll.
Okay, that's good.
All right.
Do you increase the volume? Making sure it's very high.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry about that.
Hi.
This is my mom, my beautiful, sweet mother.
Thank you.
So I actually thought it would be a good idea to kind of hear from my mother. And I was wondering if Jeff, you could just ask her a few questions like we did on our other conversation. I think that would be great, because I think it would be great to just hear it from her mouth a little bit.
Great. So why don't we start with you, Elijah, and talk about your own transition and what you actually experienced, and then we'll ask your mom, okay? So why don't
All right.
Yeah.
So I don't have like, a journey pictures of my transition, but I feel like I think like a lot of stories that we've heard so far, like I knew how I felt when I was young, probably since I was like still in Nigeria, like 3 to 5 years old or something like that. But I didn't have a word or a name for it. And I just knew that's who I was, or how I was and how I wanted to be. And then we came to America, and I started to live with my grandmother, and my mom was like she was in school and she wasn't able to live with us for a little bit. So my grandmother had very strict gender roles. In Nigeria, I was pretty much able to do whatever I wanted. In terms of like how I dress, how I express myself. Like even if we went to a party and I had to wear a dress, the minute I came home, I could throw it off and do whatever I wanted. But in America, that was just not the same thing. My grandmother would just kind of like, you can't do that, you can't do this, boys do this, girls do that. And if I was to like behave another different way, there was always a form of discipline. And that kind of taught me early on that it was not okay for me to be that way. And then I had to express myself differently in a way that was more acceptable. So I really thought that if I was to, like, for instance, wear girls' clothes and express myself in a very feminine way, that I would feel more like a girl. So I kind of did that since for a little bit. I remember one day where I wore my uncle's clothes to school. I wore, like, back when it was like cool to have baggy pants and a really long shirt. And, you know, I went to school that way and everybody thought I was a boy until somebody recognized me and then everybody found out. But I was so happy with everybody who I'm thinking that I was a boy, that I knew that's how I wanted it to be, you know, like, but I knew that at the same time I felt really ashamed because I was, like, you know, afraid that people wouldn't understand, or people, or my mom wouldn't understand. I was afraid that, like, I was just very, very ashamed about it. And so I didn't want anybody to find out. And so I tried to be as feminine as I possibly could, hoping that would kind of change something. But when I started going through puberty, things kind of just got worse. I started experiencing gender dysphoria. I think Landon might have talked about it earlier. Dysphoria being like that feeling of disconnection between your body and like how you see yourself. And as I was experiencing that, I just became more depressed, more suicidal. And there were other things that were going on in my life as well that compounded and made things worse. But what was always on the forefront was this constant feeling that something was not right, like my brain was not connected with my body, and it got worse and worse to the point where I would disassociate from my body a lot of the time. So for instance, if someone was to touch my chest, I'd just be gone in my head. You know what I mean? Like I just wouldn't be able to be present. And if somebody was like, same way, like being referred to as a girl, being referred to with my birth name, especially now, I definitely hate it now. But like before I transitioned, I would always like correct my people in my head if they use like she, her pronouns. And then like as I was growing older, I found out what being transgender was when I was 12 and I was watching a show. And then there was this guy who appeared on the show, and he looked like this like very masculine trucker dude, like I think the most stereotypical kind of expression that I could probably think of. And there was a picture of him in the background when he was a model, and he looked so feminine, like this beautiful woman. And I was like, he went from that to this, and I felt like, oh, that was possible. And I thought, oh, like this is something that I could do. But immediately after that, it was like, again, I felt like, no, it's impossible. No, you know, my mom is not gonna love me anymore. No, my mom's gonna kick me out of the house, or people are not gonna love me. People are not like, how am I gonna live a future? People are not gonna like, how am I gonna get married? How am I gonna have a family? All of these different things that I just didn't really know what to do with that. I mean, I did a lot of research. I watched how surgeries were performed. A 12-year-old probably should not have been doing that, but I did. And so I'd watch all of those things, and, you know, and I just kind of like held it inside, and I just didn't know how to express myself. I would say like the people that helped me was when I was like 14 and I went to art school and I met my counselors, and that was the first person that I actually came out to. And we went to the it was like the Youth Pride Parade. And I got to meet some other LGBT and trans people, and it was like, it made it a little bit more real to me. But at the same time, I didn't feel like I could come out yet. But as my gender dysphoria got worse and my depression got worse, and that became like the most important thing for me to do, because I didn't feel like I could deal with any of my other problems until I dealt with being able to transition. And so when I was 15 was when, like, you know, my suicidal ideation kind of came to a head, because I just kind of lost touch with everything. I thought, you know, if I'm not able to transition, like, then there was nothing left, because I wanted to be happy and I hadn't felt that feeling for a really long time. I just felt miserable all the time. And, you know, to feel anything, I'd have to self-harm, like just pain would remind me that I was alive. You know what I mean? And just so I can feel alive for a little bit. And, you know, that was not a healthy way to live. I didn't feel like I wanted to continue to harm myself just so I can prove to myself that I'm still living, so I can feel something. Because it just always felt like there was this black hole inside of my chest that was trying to suck me in. And I constantly felt like I wanted to rip my skin off. Like, this was not my body. Like, you know, and I couldn't own myself. I couldn't connect with other people either. I was such an angry person because I was angry at my life. I was angry that I was born this way. I was angry that I was trans, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I was angry that I was so isolated and away from other people and that I couldn't connect with the world. And so I think when I was 15, I knew that I think unlike other times that I had attempted, I knew that this was like genuine, like I wanted to do it and I was kind of over it and I was past it. Happiness did not feel real, it didn't feel possible, I didn't have hope anymore. You know, I think for a lot of young people who get that level of depression, the ability to see a future for ourselves kind of just disappears. And I think I've heard Landon say something similar before, and it was something that also resonated with me because when I was like, when I was 15, like I just didn't imagine myself becoming 18. Even now as I age, every time I age and I'm 22 and I'm 23, it blows my mind because I never thought I'd make it to this age. And I'm so grateful every day that I did not take my life then. And so like, when I was going to the day, like I was going to attempt, I remember sitting in the girls' bathroom and I saw this poster said, it's that like, cute, like hang in there kind of poster. And it made me remember the last time that I felt genuinely happy. And it was when I was in Nigeria. I was probably like 3 or 5 years old, somewhere around that age. And I remember I was in my usual getup, which was not wearing a shirt and wearing shorts. And I was chasing my sister around the compound in Nigeria. Like you have a gate and then you have a large compound. And we have like we kept like water in these like balloon bags and you drink water out of those bags. And so I was chasing her and I was spraying her hair with water and she was shrieking and I was laughing. And I just remembered, oh my, like I felt that feeling of happiness, like I was happy. Like she probably wasn't happy as I was spraying her with water, but I was. And so I just like I was just like, oh, that feeling is possible. It is possible for me to feel that feeling because for a long time I thought maybe something in me was just broken. Maybe I would just never be able to feel that ever again. But I realized that it was possible. And if I wanted, and I felt like, I deserved to feel that feeling again. I deserved to feel that happiness again. So I told my guidance counselor what I was going to do. I showed her some of my self-harm scars and everything. And she called the police and I was hospitalized for like 2 weeks. I went into outpatient care. I'm there. I wrote my mom a letter because I was terrified. My mom has quick hands, is all I'm saying. And so I was like really scared. So I like gave her the letter and I ran away. And then we didn't talk about it for a little bit. So I told my therapist that I wanted to talk to her to like just bring it up. And so we talked about it. And my mom was like, she just didn't know what it was. And she really thought like, she just was very confused. She thought it was something that happened on television and not in real life. And, there was no Nigeria, like she didn't think there were anybody in Nigeria that was transgender. I think I heard you say pretty much that you blamed us, bringing us here for me being trans. And I was like, I breathed it in the air, suddenly trans. But that's not how it was. But it was a very long road of not understanding like my mom's struggles. But what I did learn throughout that process is that my mom loved me a lot. I didn't feel like she loved me for a long time, which is not my mom's fault. Like she was working a lot. She had to do a lot to put food on the table. So, this is a woman that worked 3 jobs at once so that we can live our lives. And if you see my amazing house, she's the one that bought it with her own money by herself, So this is my amazing mother. And, and just learning that, although I wasn't able to feel that love growing up, through my transition, I was able to finally feel how much my mother loved me because she had to like get to that place where she was able to learn about me, learn how to love somebody who was differently than what she expected. And for a while, there was a lot of prayer, sprinkling of water while I was sleeping. Like I like to tell the story where there was one night I was laying in bed and I was sleeping and she just like, I just woke up with her sprinkling water on me and I looked at her and I went right back to sleep. I'm like, you know what, do you? And so it was like that. And then, I would feel like I would hear her pray for me not to be trans anymore. But I feel like she was doing that because she didn't want me to have the pain and suffering that I was having. And so I've taken a different perspective, whereas before it hurt me because I wanted her to accept me as I was because I knew there was no way I was going to change. I'm so sorry my family just came from shopping. And so like those things kind of just were, sorry, I just got this interruption.
So like, it's a wonderful story. People are all saying in the chat how inspired they are by this incredibly beautiful story. So thank you. It's wonderful. And you are just giving such a great example about when you were able to be yourself, you were able to see a future for yourself and how your mother's love and support for you helped you to thrive.
I could ask my brother because my brother was actually the one who actually played a really big part in helping my mom come to terms with letting me transition. Cody, do you want to see?
That because just to introduce him because you love your brother and it shows how siblings can play a role in helping parents to be more supportive. And
No, just 1 minute.
Okay. Well, Omalara.
Yes.
Oh, good. There he is. Hey, there's your brother. Hey there. What's your name?
My name's Karita.
Nice. So you What helped you to love your brother so much the way he is?
I think the first step is recognizing that he's a human being before he is anything else.
Nice.
And in the recognition of that, asking who I want to be in relation to him in his life and my desire to be in his life, is saying that to do that, I have to fully accept him for who he is, because I want to be accepted myself as well. And by doing that, he and I got closer over time as well. And I saw that through loving him, I also learned to love myself more as well, because when you love someone, you have to be able to understand the depth of love within yourself. And in that expression, I saw that through bettering my relationship with him and my family in general, I could actually accept myself in the world even better, as like in the same way he experienced as well.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. We need to do a whole documentary on your entire family, Elijah. So we need to wrap up, but Omalar, if you could just say a word or two about what helped you to love Elijah. You're just filled with such beautiful, generous joy and spirit and love.
Hi, everybody. I mean, it was a pretty tough journey, very painful, because I just felt as if by accepting him for who he is, I'm losing a daughter. But the moment there was, and apart from that, I'm a Christian. I believe it is wrong. If God created you some way and your biological sex is either male or female, that is how it should be for life. Not considering his own feeling, until one day we went for an appointment and the doctor wrote a prescription. And I was now talking to my son that, Perrotti, that I feel that I'm doing something wrong by going to, pick up this prescription. And he opened my eyes. He said, it's not about the sex, it's about the person. That it may not be real to me, but the way he feels is real to him. All I need to do is to accept him for who he is. And that opened my eye, because he has feelings. Everybody wants to be loved and to be accepted. So the most important thing is to understand where he's coming from and to accept him for who he is. And that was what I did. From that moment on, I didn't look back, because it's not the sex that his biological sex that I love, is the person. And Elijah will always be my son. I love him. It's not the biological sex that I love, it's the person, who he is. And he will always be who he is, no matter what. And everybody has a reason, a purpose for which they are created. And they also have a right to be happy, irrespective of what the society believe is right or wrong. And everybody has something to give to the society. And I'm glad I have him. He's very strong. I mean, for him to have, gone through so much and be able to say, okay, this is who I am. I thank God for that. And I'll support him all the way. And the most important thing is education, which I'm glad about what you are doing, is to create awareness. I trained as a nurse. I mean, I have first degree in mathematics and banking and finance. I did some MBA. Then when I came to America, I went to nursing school. They didn't train you about this in nursing school. They don't create this kind of awareness in nursing school. And what you are doing right now is creating more awareness for people to understand, parents to understand, people in the society to understand. Just as you have a right to live as a male or female, they also need to have a right to live and exist. Not just exist, to be happy, to thrive, to live. Because prior to the time that he came out, he was just existing. He wasn't happy. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. But the moment that he could express himself for who he is, he began to live. And I want my baby to be happy, to have joy. I will give anything, take away all his pain and give him all my joy. And that is what it means to be a mother, to be a parent. I love him. I'm not saying this because he's my son. Everybody has a right to experience that joy. I mean, to live to the full potential of who you are able to be. So, I mean, I don't want to take too much of your. I love you, baby. I love you. I love you so much. That's all right, darling. I love you, baby. It's been a long journey,
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying it for his ears only. I love him.
Thank you. Omalar and Elijah, just beautiful. People in the chat are saying how moved they are, how inspiring you are, how your family needs to be a documentary. You are a success story. You know, Ayanna Pressley said, nothing moves the needle towards social justice as much as the development of empathy. And nothing creates empathy as much as hearing the direct experiences from young people and from their parents. So many people are saying, how do you help parents to love their child? People realize, many people, hundreds of people right now on this webinar recognize that sometimes the most important thing they could do for a young person is helping a parent to know how to love and support their child. And all the research shows, the Family Acceptance Project website shows that if a parent just becomes a little bit more supportive, a little bit less rejecting, the benefits are enormous. The mental health benefits are enormous for a young person. They don't have to become a celebratory parent, marching in pride parades. They just have to become a little bit more supportive. And the people watching this webinar, you may be that one person to help a parent, to just say to a parent, your child's awesome. Whatever you're doing that has helped your child to be who they are, to recognize that they can be their authentic selves, you should be so proud that your child has the courage and the strength to be who they are. So hearing your love for Elijah is just an example of how people can evolve in love, and how that love in the end is what this is about. And people in the chat are talking about kindness and love, and how, you know what, there is a grieving process. People are talking right now about things that they're grieving and all the different stages they go through: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, sadness, and acceptance, and finding meaning in it. And this is so much what transgender young people and their families, just like yours, have taught us about the power of being yourself and being loved for who you are, and being open to the surprises in your life, that no matter what or how bleak your circumstances are, there are wonderful surprises in store for you. Be open to the surprises in your life. And you are an example of it. Meeting you and having you part of this webinar, thank you so much. Thank you, both of you. So I texted Reese, thanks so much to both of you. And I told Reese, I said, Reese, you have 1 minute to talk about how much you love your son and your school. So Reese, you just have a moment. I'm going to put up Harper's photo now. After, wait, are you there, Reese?
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, good.
Reese. Well, I can't say anything better than the other moms ahead of me have said, but I just want to thank teachers and administrators. My son transitioned when he was in 2nd grade, and the school and everyone, including my other children's teachers, my 2 other kids' teachers, were so loving and caring. And one of their teachers said to me, when I thanked my older daughter's teacher, and she said, one of the things that I've learned knowing your family is that I may not know I have a transgender child in my class, but I might. But I also have a best friend of a transgender child, a sibling of a transgender child, a neighbor, a teammate. So the support is overwhelming, and I thank you for loving our kids when they're out of our homes and they're in your care during the day.
So Reese, just say who your kids are here and what.
So in the red is Charlie. He is my cisgender twin boy. He was born boy and identifies as a boy. The middle is my daughter Grace. She's cisgender girl. And then in the blue jacket is Harper. He's our transgender superhero, hockey player, ski racer. So that's my family.
Reese, that's amazing. So I'm going to give people, since we're at the time, even though we're going to just go a couple minutes over, I'm going to give you the last letter, which is a small L, a lowercase L. So that's the last letter. Oh my gosh, Haley, I just see your chat. What a wonderful mom also on the webinar here, loving your child. Okay, so this is it. So we have a couple things just to finish. We're going to put up some resources at the end, and we're also going to send these out to all of you. This is we're going to put up this. I want to just share one term that's often new and helpful to people, and that is microaffirmations. In the social justice literature, people are really familiar with the term microaggressions, those small, sometimes not so small, racist, anti-Semitic, racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, transphobic things that cumulatively create harm. Microaffirmations are those small, sometimes not so small things that make a big positive difference. In this day and age, we are certainly experiencing now how little things make a big difference, and acts of kindness to yourself and to others, those are micro affirmations, the small things that make a big difference. And so I wanted to introduce that term to people, because the way we're going to end in the chat is by having people write something you learned first, then something you felt, and then one step you're going to do, and then we're going to compile those for everyone. So these are the resources that I just want to put up here as websites that we find very helpful. People asked especially for what are some good resources for elementary and middle school students. I want to refer you to amaze.org because it's an incredible resource that offers videos and curricula and discussion questions for educators, parents, and young people from 6 years old through high school. It's primarily was made for middle school, but now they have a part of the website called Amaze Junior for 6 to 10-year-olds, and there are also things that are appropriate for high school. I encourage you to look at that website and check out some of the 2 to 3 minute videos and accompanying lesson plans. The Trevor Project has a wonderful new guide that's just out right now about how to be an ally to transgender people. GLSEN, Welcoming Schools, and Gender Spectrum all have wonderful resources, including bibliographies and support plans for what actually facilitates a smooth transition. And as I said, we are available to provide technical assistance or training to, for you during this time as well. Landon, did you see any specific questions you saw that need to be responded to before we end?
There were some questions around like middle school GSAs for younger students.
Yep.
So I think that there's a middle school GSA like handbook, if Jeff,
Yes.
if you have that resource.
Yes, and we also have, I know Bert Whittier's on the call who created that handbook. He's one of the co-advisors of the Melrose Middle School GSA. But we also have a few webinars coming up. One this week that our Safe Schools program for LGBTQ students is talking about affinity groups and GSAs at the elementary and middle school level. So look at the Safe Schools program for LGBTQ students website, as well as look at the Commission on LGBTQ Youth website, because we're constantly posting other webinars that we are doing on these different topics. And let us know what you actually want to have different webinars on. And again, we will be sharing these resources with you. The last thing we want you to be writing in the chat right now, we want you to start with anything you learned or anything you're thinking. And then, so that might be, I learned about amaze.org. I learned what the word cisgender means, or I learned about scanning for safety, or microaffirmations, or what pansexual means, or what you're thinking, that the age of gender identity is established by age 4, or anything else that you learned. And then write down one thing. Yep. And then
there's
I'm
another
just gonna
question.
and write down one. Let me just finish this instruction so people can write in the chat, because we're going to compile this and send this out to people. And then one thing that you're feeling. So you might be, I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling confused. I'm feeling encouraged, motivated, uplifted. Any feeling. Those of us in therapy can help you distinguish a thought from a feeling. So a feeling. And then the third one, you could be grateful. I'm grateful to be part of this community, to be in a state that supports. I'm grateful. I'm in awe of the courage of these young people and families, and in awe of their courage in sharing their stories. And then one step or action you're going to take as the result of anything you learned or felt. I'm motivated to find virtual ways to support my students and families. I'm going to have a conversation about this with my children. I'm going to see if we can provide professional development for our staff virtually. I'm going to make an effort to check out some of the resources. I'm going to check out amaze.org. So thought, feeling, and step, the cognitive, affective, and behavioral aspects of change. And just like we're learning during this pandemic that we can learn new things and we learn new habits, people could learn to use they as a singular pronoun. We can learn to use our pronouns. We can learn the different behaviors that we want to be encouraging, learning, and acts of kindness and micro-affirmations around this area. People can change. We have learned that, and this is one of the areas in which we hope to be able to make the world a better place. That is part of the opportunity right now that we are going through, is that this is a pause unlike any other pause ever before. We are able to take stock, see the way in which we want to make the world a better place, and what some specific actions can be to do that. Please, one of the things we recognize that contributes to resilience is finding a meaningful way to contribute. We all, this is the book that we co-wrote 20 years ago, and we ended with this paragraph, is that the next generation gives us hope. We leave you with the words of one student who was frustrated that no one in her school was taking the lead to start a GSA. While waiting for someone to step in and take charge, she had an epiphany. I wondered why someone didn't do anything. Then I realized I am someone. And I think that that's the message we want all of you to be thinking about at this time. What role do you have to play in helping to assume your own leadership right now and the ways in which you want to be making change? So this is what we would have done with your thoughts, feelings, and steps if we were in person. This is what we call head, heart, feet. You could see I feel grateful and inspired, and you'll be sharing yours. And I always love to end with this passage from Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal by Jeanette Winterson, who is a lesbian fiction English writer. This is her memoir. She had a neglectful childhood where her mother locked her in the basement. It's a wonderful story of resilience, and talk about cognitive reframing that can happen when you're in a negative environment. And she said the one good thing about being shut in a coal hole is that it prompts reflection. Talk about how that might apply to what we're going through right now. Read on its own, that is an absurd sentence. But as I try and understand how life works and why some people cope better than others with adversity, she's about ready to tell you her theory of resilience. I come back to something to do with saying yes to life, which is love of life, however inadequate, and love for the self, however found. Not in the me first way that is the opposite of life and love, but with a salmon-like determination to swim upstream, however choppy upstream is, because this is your stream. I come back to something to do with saying yes to life, which is love of life, however inadequate, and love for the self, however found. And this is the last poem that really speaks to what everyone says, which is the power of being loved. It's a Raymond Carver poem, very short. And did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel beloved on this earth. And I think that the superintendent in a recent training, at the end of it, she hadn't said a word in the whole 2 hours. And at the end, she said, what I'm taking from this is that we're all better. It's about love. And we're all better off when we're loved for who we are. So Landon, you said that there was a quick question you wanted to have before we read some of the things in the chats.
Oh, people were just wondering where this webinar, if it's being recorded, if it's going to be posted. I know people wanted to bring this back to their schools and whatnot.
Yep, we're going to figure out what we can do with that and how we can make different things available. The Commission on LGBTQ Youth is hoping to be making different webinars or edited forms of webinars public. So we'll keep you posted, and we have the ways to contact all of you. So you could see some of the things in the chat that people wrote, whether it's from definitions. I learned the meaning of pansexual. I'm feeling moved. I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling supportive and mindful. I learned how important it is to cultivate systems of support, whether through the family or the school system. I plan to spend some of these time on these websites to bring resources to my school. And I feel grateful to hear from all of the families who participated today. So we will make your learnings, your feelings, and your steps available to all of you. And so please we'll leave up the chat for a little while for people to write some more things about what you learned and felt and what steps you're going to take. I know that I speak for everyone and how grateful we all are to all of you for sharing your personal experiences on the panel. And I just want to really say how grateful I am to all the people listening right now and all the work that you're doing. What takes place in schools matters. That's why we are all in this business of education. What you do makes a difference. It is a gift and a privilege to be doing this work together and alongside you. Please use us as a resource. We are here of help in whatever way. And some of that's just connecting you with each other. Just like some of your most important work is connecting students with each other or parents with each other, showing a video to a parent. Nothing moves a parent closer to being more supportive than seeing another parent who's had the same experience and then seeing the ways in which they're loving their child. We can help you to connect parents with each other, just like the amazing parents and young people that you saw here today. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Landon, for doing this with me. Thank you, Margie, and your wonderful crew for hosting this. And we look forward to continue to be connected with you and find ways to continue to support and love each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff and company. I really don't even have the words to say. Certainly what was reflected in the chat just spoke to how powerful this webinar was. Your stories are so enlightening and so beautiful, and I think we all just have learned so much by listening to this. I'm going to just quickly say the code out loud because I'm getting a number of emails already. Capital H, capital E, capital N, capital Y, lowercase u, and lowercase l. And I'm sorry, a few people who wrote me earlier, I told them it was lowercase I at the end. So if you write an I instead of an L, don't worry about it. It'll be absolutely fine. We'll leave the chat up for about 5 minutes. Then you'll see our screen, which will give you information about PDP, CEUs, etc. This information also is found on our website. I would really appreciate you reading the website before contacting me with a question that the website really answers. Tomorrow we are going to have Megan Harding from Bright, and she's going to talk about engaging with families during COVID-19. So we hope that many of you will be able to join us. And again, just a heartfelt thanks to Jeff Perrotti and the wonderful panelists. Thank you so much again. And I'm going to sign out. Have a great day.
Thanks, Margie. So Margie, while the chat's up, I thought I would just put up our slide with the resources, okay?
That would be fabulous.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And again, just a big shout out to all of you. Fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks.